My brother is 7 years older than I am, so when I was between 9 and 10, he was in high school and had to hide from our parents that he smoked and dipped tobacco. As a result, most days of the week after he got home from school, I was homeschooled. We'd go out in the woods for an hour or two. We lived way out in the country in an already rural part of East Texas, so there were plenty of woods to explore. The land south of our house was all owned by a mining company, and my parents didn't want us going there, so we always crossed a fence to the north of our house and explored the woods out there. Very likely some locals' property that we had no business being on. But when you live out in the country, you figure you'll have plenty of sign before you accidentally walk into someone's backyard. After a few months of venturing out in this area, never traveling more than an hour's distance from our house and always in the daylight, we decided one day we'd just keep walking. My brother smoked and spit into a Dr. Pepper bottle. We entered big pastures and dove back into even deeper woods. Whenever we've talked about it, we've always said that we must have traveled at least a mile, but we usually say far more. Eventually, we came across a circular pond I distinctly remember having a much higher rim on one side. My brother explained that this was because a tractor had dug it out and piled up more dirt on one side than the others. We kept going past the pond and entered another patch of woods. As we came out, we saw that the tree line curved around sharply to the right, and the clearing we now stood in opened up far wider. We went in that direction, and while my memory of getting there is a little hazy, I know we suddenly came across a very large white building surrounded by a high fence. There was a gate large enough for vehicles to move in and out, and a dirt road leading away from the facility. We could hear the sounds of activity, and could see people walking around the outside of the fence near the gate. I'm afraid any other detail I could give at this point might be colored by false memory or exaggerations from an imaginative young brain, so I'll wait to talk to my brother about it more before I go any further. At that moment, we both felt the spine-tingling terror alerting our bodies that something about this was very wrong. We were not supposed to be here. We were at the very least going to get into serious trouble. We were standing in the middle of a clearing, gawking at a facility of some kind on what was obviously someone else's property, and we were seeing something deep out in the woods that we had never known was here. All this time we'd spent walking around these woods. If we'd just gone a ways further, we would have stumbled across this. I remember standing there for a moment longer, asking my brother what this could possibly be. He told me something along the lines of, "I have no clue, but we should really get the fuck out of here." The tone of his voice truly freaked me out, and I remember running hard back the way we came, crossing the same pond, and cutting a path as close as possible to the route we had traveled. When we finally stopped, out of breath, my brother told me that in no way, shape, or form would I utter a word of this to our parents. They were spankers and awful grounders, so he knew the trouble he'd be in for taking his little brother into what was quite possibly serious danger. After that day, we kept going out in those woods, but never that far. Eventually, my brother got caught with a can of Skull, and my dad made him eat the whole can and puke it up on the porch. Being an easily intimidated little kid, it wasn't hard to get more information out of me about my brother's smoking and dipping habits, but I never brought up the facility we'd found. Over the years, my brother and I have brought this story up many times. Our parents have gotten way laxer since we've all grown up, and we've even told them the story, to my mother's retroactive shock. We've added a lot of other weird ones to our arsenal in the time since, as our family has always lived by huge areas of lands for us to wander around on. But this is one of our favorites. It's always, remember the time we almost got killed by those government researchers? Remember the time we found that crazy building in the woods with those people walking around it? But for the past few days, this event has really been bugging me. I told my wife about it in detail, and she was pretty amused. I thought I'd look around and Google Maps a little bit at the area we grew up in. Something I'm honestly surprised I've never done for these specific reasons before. And what I found, or haven't found, is really bizarre. Moving north from my old house, which has since burned down and left an ugly scar on the satellite image on Google Maps, I can very clearly make out the woods we spend our time in. When I go further north, I can see several large clearings, followed by more wooded areas. Eventually, I even found a circular pond, and I'm positive I can make out the higher end of the pond that we stood on as my brother explained how it had been made. When I drag the map further, I see what looks to be the clearing, and the sharp curve of the tree line to where we saw the facility. But there's nothing there. No trace of a building, no evidence of a dirt road leading away from an old structure. It's just pasture and more trees. In fact, when I zoom out and look at the whole area, it doesn't seem possible for there to have been an operation of the scale we saw out there at all. Just a little ways further north, the land becomes nothing but pasture with houses pressed up against the county road. For people to have come and gone from this area, they would have had to have had a road of some kind, as well as power lines stretched out to the building. But there's nothing like that on Google. In fact, there is really no "here it was" spot on the map. It's like it was never there to begin with. It's been a few years since we've talked about it, so I texted my brother earlier today to ask him if he still remembered this happening. He called me immediately after and said, "Hell yeah, man. That was a really weird day. Know how good I used to be in the woods? But that shit really freaked me out. We had to get out of there." This whole event feels more and more like something that we walked into that we shouldn't have seen. I still remember the feeling of dread upon finding the place, and knowing that something bad would happen if we stuck around. In February of last year, my half-brother John, who's from my dad's first marriage, texted my sister and told her to tell her dad that he would be coming over to stay for what we originally thought was going to be a few weeks at my parents' house. Apparently, he had gotten into an argument with his half-brother that he was living with at the time. He came over here so he could get a job and later have his own place. For the first few weeks, he was sleeping on the couch in our dining room, and eventually my mom told me to bunk with my sister upstairs so he could have the room downstairs, since his body odor was so bad that he was stinking up her dining room. 2 months later, it becomes clear he isn't looking for a job, so my dad and John's girlfriend start badgering him to look for one. He eventually does get a job at a spice factory, which didn't work out as he got laid off in November later that year. 2 months later, he brought his girlfriend over and never really asked if she could stay there. He would bring her over to visit every now and then, only this time she never really left. My dad eventually got around to asking him how long she would be staying. John said that he had asked him if she could move in, and claimed my dad agreed to let her. However, my dad insists that he never asked him. He hesitantly agreed since she was pretty much the exact opposite of John, and he was hoping that she could motivate him into getting a new job since he was still unemployed at the time, and there were plenty of job opportunities around us. Flash forwards a few months, and John went to my mom and handed her an ultrasound. He had gotten his girlfriend pregnant. With her pregnancy, my dad pressured him even harder to get a job. A little while later, he found one at a Harbor Freight, about an hour and a half away from us, but he was spending most of his wage on gas just to get there. In the following months up to when the baby was born, John would be making creepy comments to my younger sister. He would tell her how good she looked in dresses, as well as things she would wear to church, and other inappropriate and unwanted comments. He acted like he owned the place and had rights to whatever he wanted by eating all the food in the house, especially things my mom was saving to feed everyone for dinner, taking up the whole couch with all his electronics, controllers, and cords, and taking 2 hours in the bathroom to shower, even though he'd still come out smelling exactly the same. Eventually, the baby was born, and he was finally forced to take on some actual responsibility, which went about as well as you would expect. Fast forward to yesterday. My mother told me to not go into the family room because my dad was planning to tell John he needed to find a place to live by October, or else he was going to kick him out. When they finally had the conversation, my dad was holding John's baby, and John was sitting across from my dad. After my dad told him, John suddenly jumped across the room, grabbed a hold of his neck, and started strangling him, all while my dad was holding John's baby. My dad gave John 2 punches to the face, but they didn't even faze him. The whole time, the baby was crying, still held in his arm, while her own father was choking the life out of her grandfather. John finally stopped when his girlfriend started yelling and pleading with him to stop. He finally did, went to get his car keys, and stormed off. This happened less than 24 hours of writing this. We think he went to his mother's house. We still haven't heard from John, and he hasn't even contacted his girlfriend to ask if she or the baby is okay. I did see that he was online on Steam just a little while ago, and the last thing he played was a porn game. We have the entire house locked up, and my dad is sleeping on the couch downstairs in case he comes back. Our biggest concern right now is that he has keys to the house, and he might come back and cause more trouble. The rest of our family wanted to call the cops, but my dad decided against it, because he wanted him to be able to get a job and subsequently housing for his baby, and that he wouldn't be able to if he had a criminal record. Obviously, he's not allowed to come back, and we are planning on putting all of his stuff on the front lawn so he can come and get it without having to come into the house. We decided his girlfriend is welcome to stay as long as she needs to, and she's thinking of breaking up with him because she is scared that he might harm her or the baby. If John had no reservations about assaulting my dad while he was holding his own baby, we don't want to find out what else he's capable of.